Hi, and welcome to the 8-week portraiture course in black and white. We're going to really do a deep dive into doing black and white portraiture, and I thought it might be a good idea for me to discuss a few open-ended areas here and a few sort of theoretical areas of portraiture and black and white portraiture and specifics. I love shooting in black and white, and I have, at this point in my career, I don't shoot very much black and white film anymore, but at some point in my career, I was shooting upwards of 30 rolls a week, 40 rolls a week. It was not unusual. So I'm very familiar with shooting black and white film. Now, shooting digital is different because the capture, the raw capture, captures everything. And using filtration in your black and white is much more difficult and a little bit more esoteric now than it was in the day. You could put a red filter on your lens and darken blues, or you could put a yellow and darken blues a little bit less, and orange filters did something different than blue filters, and etc. But these days there's still a lot to the old black and white process that we still have to be aware of, and we still have to shoot to that knowledge as well. So we're going to do this first little class here called Thinking in Black and White, and that's what we're going to do. Going to do this course, going to also put it up as a PDF for you to download, but you'll be able to see these slides as the PDF if you want to come back to it. The video will be here on the page forever. So I don't think of black and white as a stepchild of color photography. Back in the day, there was always the cost factor. Magazine printing in full color was so much more expensive to get the color separations made and the plates and all of those things, that sometimes advertisers, in order to save money, would go with one color, black ink, and black and white ads and photographs, etc., would be sometimes a cost factor. But at the same time, there were some photographers who, for them, black and white was the medium. One contemporary photographer, Peter Lindbergh, still shoots the vast majority of his work in black and white, and shoots that black and white specifically because he sees it as being a different art form than color photography. And that's how I look at it personally. Black and white is not a stepchild of color. It is its own world. I think that planning the shot to be black and white is one of the areas that helps me see it better. In other words, I visualize everything. There was a term that we use so often, and I'll slip and say it. I know it in this presentation. I know I'm going to say pre-visualization. Pre-visualization is actually redundant, since visualization is a pre-look at the image. So visualization, in that I see the picture in black and white in my head, and I start to look at the contrasts and the luminances of the picture to make sure they're going to fit into what I'm seeing in my head. After shooting that many rolls of black and white film, literally tens of thousands of rolls of black and white film a year, you get very used to it, used to see the world in black and white, see those values, know that that pink shirt and that orange scarf look really cool in color, but are going to suck in black and white. And I think that's one of the most prevalent areas of black and white photography, is understanding how the luminances work in the subjects. Very colorful picture. Orange, light, a light orange, light blue, and pink. Wow, isn't that cool? They just vibrate off the page. They're so pretty. This is a great color scheme, I guess, for color, because you can certainly see it. We can have no problem differentiating these. However, if we shoot it in black and white, we may not be so excited anymore. The orange and the blue are the same luminance. They they reflect the same amount of light. All that we're photographing when we're doing black and white is the reflection of light. So if our subject is wearing a beautiful dress of all these colors, oh wow, that's awesome. This is what it's going to look like in black and white. We have to know that. Maybe we can filter that by using an orange filter. For instance, we could, if we put orange on the camera and we're shooting in black and white preview mode or black and white film, the orange will make that lighter. The orange filter will make that lighter. The red filter will make the pink a little bit lighter. As we saw, though, that probably wouldn't be a good idea. The blue will make the blue lighter. Will that help? Probably not much. So in color, magnificent. In black and white, not so much. Let's look at a real life example. This photograph I did of this young lady in Seattle on a summer day in Seattle, and we had some beautiful blue sky and some clouds, and I brought a flash in and lit her up. Now she has a nice suntan. It's summertime and she took advantage of getting tan. So we have nice copper colors through here. We've got some blush on her cheek that's very easy to see. We got a little bit of eye makeup that just really sparkles there, and her lips are the same color as the red in the dress here. So it makes a really fun, pretty, vibrant color photograph. In black and white, the skin goes muddy because it's bronze, it's bronzed by the sun, not a skin color, but a bronze color. And the blush disappears because the pink and the bronze were the same color, same luminance. Let's put it that way. Same luminance. Same with the eye makeup, almost unseen at this point, and the lips are blending in to the chin. We have blotchy skin down here, a little bit dark and muddy in here. So I needed to fix this. To make a black and white out of it, I need to fix it in Photoshop, and thank goodness we can. I can lighten the skin using a channel mixer and raising up the red values. In other words, there's so much red in the skin that I can raise that up with the channel mixer. I can then burn the lips a little bit, burn a little bit of dodging and burning, burn a little bit of cheeks back in, and burn her eye makeup back in as well. I soften this contrast up here from the straight black and white conversion. It's so dark and muddy here. I pop it up a little bit and give it a much nicer view. That being said, I'd rather shoot it correctly in the camera, which means this shot, this lighting, was probably not right for her to shoot black and white. I was shooting color, by the way. I knew it was going to be in color. I wanted to take a color photograph that wouldn't work for conversion to show you how difficult it is to make that conversion, or how many steps we have to go through. Not difficult. We can easily do it. We're going to look at many different ways of converting black and white, so this will be nice. Now, one thing that I do is I change my my screen on the back to be black and white. I know that I'm not shooting black and white. I'm shooting a raw image. I'm shooting a full-on color image. Everything is being captured. I'm just looking at the preview in black and white. And I do black and white previews probably when I'm shooting people, probably more than color previews, because I'm very, very much more concerned with the contrast, with the luminance, and all of the elements of the shot, which I can see more as a graphic representation in black and white, and I don't get lost in the color. Yes, I'll do a couple color previews, absolutely, but I like the camera back to be black and white. I really do prefer seeing the world as black and white once I know my color is there. I can change more compositionally when I'm looking at black and white than I do when I'm looking at color. So it's kind of an exciting thing to try. If you haven't done it yet, try switching over to the black and white preview or monochrome preview when you're shooting, and see if you don't see just a little bit more of what's going on in the picture than you do in color. So yeah, it's not gonna change your picture. You haven't lost your color. It's still there. You can just go into Lightroom or Camera Raw and go up to your presets and just or your shooting styles, I'm sorry, and just change it back to color, portrait, whatever you want, and you'll have all of that because you shot it in RAW. I want everybody to understand exposure, because exposure in black and white photography is extremely important. And I have a class on using a meter, whether it's the meter in your camera or the meter, handheld meter that you may have. It's over at Udemy. It's free. There's no cost to you. If you're at all concerned about understanding and what I call placing exposure, please go and take that workshop ASAP. It'll only take you an afternoon or a couple hours to go through it, but you'll definitely understand it. In this particular shot, I placed exposure. She has dark skin. I knew I wanted to raise that dark skin, and I had to, this is a white wall, and this is a, believe it or not, this is a dark road here, sort of a, you can see it's sort of a brickish kind of road, but where the sun is, we're getting a full-on specular of the sun. It's just absolutely blowing out back here. Now, placing exposure means moving her into the zone of exposure where she shows up. If I expose for this white wall, she's going to be a silhouette. If I expose for the bricks, she's going to be a silhouette. I don't care about this background because I'm a fashion beauty photographer. I don't care whether this is in there or not. I just want the skin tones. And so I based my exposure on her skin, which was quite dark, and then opened up 3 stops. So the camera said F8, and I went F8, 5.6, 4, 2.8. I shot it at 2.8, and I got the shot I wanted. Because I placed my exposure, I didn't accept the exposure. And if you don't understand the difference, please go over and take that free workshop. I think you'll very much enjoy it. Monochrome, by the way, doesn't only mean black and white. When I was shooting fashion and beauty back in the mid-'80s, most of my photographs, in fact, I had a full portfolio of photographs that were all monochrome, but only a handful were black and white. They were toned in blues, golds, sepias, selenium, yellows. I would bleach, I would tone an image in gold, bleach it back, and then retone it again in sepia to have a different effect to it. I spent a lot of time in the darkroom. The darkroom was my Photoshop at the time, and had a blast doing it. I created images on Cibachrome paper. If I wanted to get a color that wasn't available in toner, I would shoot a black and white positive, like a Polaroid black and white slide, and put it in the enlarger and put a filter in front of the lens and print on color paper. So I would have a monochrome image that was a very slight blue or slight greenish blue. So lots of different things. Monochrome in my mind does not only mean black and white. This particular shot was done with a new film at the time. This shot was done a long time ago. And it was a Kodak's high-speed ISO 3200 film. And gosh, I love that film. This was actually taken, this photograph that you see here was taken under moonlight. And that is moonlight coming in the window that she's looking out of there. So it is moonlight 3200. I pushed it 1 stop to 6400. And then when I put it in the developer. I left it in the developer for another 3 minutes. It's called pushing the film, and that up-cooked my highlights. So the everything cooked up a little bit higher, but I kept cooking the highlights in here. That's understanding the zone system. We're not going to get into the zone system because it doesn't really work for digital photography, because the zone system has to do with chemistry, and there's no chemistry. But anyway, she was all made up for a black and white shoot that we had done earlier, and so her lips show up, her eyes show up, the makeup works, and all that great blonde hair flowing around. That was a lot of fun shooting under moonlight. This is a blue-toned image, and it was shot on a Plus X film, and the makeup is exactly as you see it there, because we knew we were working in black and white, so we had to accentuate the makeup, almost theatrical. And this is a very theatrical kind of shot. So she has dark red lips, and she has dark blue, brownish eyeshadow. If I'd shot her in color, it probably would not have worked at all. We didn't care. We tested in Polaroid in black and white to always make sure exactly what we wanted to have would happen here. So this image is tone blue. Then I bleached it out, and I toned it a second time in a very light blue toner. Actually left it in the toner for about an hour. That's the kind of work that I did back in those days. And here's another one last pure 80s shot, pure 1980s, if you can't tell from the earrings and the hair. We had to prepare the image beforehand, knowing exactly what we wanted to do when we went in, because we didn't have Photoshop to fix it. We couldn't go back in and do little things. In this particular shot, she had a little bit of a sun strap here from getting a little bit of sun and having a tan line here. Wasn't much I could do about this back in the day. I could put this in Photoshop right now and take it out in about 4 seconds, but this is a photograph of a print, and I'm not doing any Photoshop on these at all, so you can see exactly what the photograph looked like. So we got some very soft light coming in. We've got good lips and good eye makeup. But the other thing that you always want to watch is your background. You know, your background is going to be part of your image as well. So if your background becomes a luminance that's very close to the hair, you can lose that. In this particular case, the luminance is pretty close, but I'm using that little wink of backlight to give it some highlights here so that she stands out. The other part of it, of course, is using very shallow depth of field, so she's very sharp and in focus, and the background is out of focus. This is a shot with the Nikkor 180mm f2.8 at f2.8. The constant in all of shooting black and white is your luminance values. So always be aware of them. So let's pop ahead about 30 years to this young lady standing by a window and prepared for the photograph, and prepared for it well with the makeup and everything else that's going on, the light, the background, the hair, and the fill. We have, you can see in the eyes, big window here, big fill card right here to really bounce that light in. Her makeup was great for black and white. She's very young. She doesn't use a lot of eye makeup, especially these days. It's not, it's more of a night thing. And I like fresh faces, so I shoot fresh faces. So, that's getting back to that shoot what you love kind of thing. And I like fresh faces. So we put a little bit more lip color on it just because we did a test with that black and white preview, saw the lips weren't quite there, and just darkened them up a little bit. sometimes you have to plan your shoots around makeup changes. This is summer down in Mexico, and she had very natural makeup on, which is, again, something I really, really like. And I noticed that her lips were very pale, and I thought, okay, well, I'm going to get this shot because the light was great. We were, it was just, everything was ticking along. I didn't want to stop the shoot and have her go darken her lips. Plus, if she had done that, then anybody else, the next couple of shots, I would have had her taking that lipstick off. So I just said in my mind, hey, if I need to darken them, I will. But she has some dark features in her eyes. And for me, black and white photography, it's so important for the eyes to work. You can't have muddy eyes in black and white photography. The eyes have to pop as much as possible. So I made the shot in color, and I took it into Photoshop to make it in black and white. And I liked the lips. She looks very natural. And I also brought the contrast up so that we could see a little bit of texture in her skin. We could see a little of the freckles and the whole bit. I wanted that. And the color, I didn't care that much. So in this particular case, both of these images work for me. I'm very happy with the color. I'm very happy with the black and white. It's got a little bit of a gritty feel to it, but she still looks very, very natural. So it's very soft light. It's backlight behind her. She's in the shade, right on the edge of the shade. And then we have two white cards, big white cards on either side, you can see on her eyes. Big white card on this side of her, big white card on this side of her, and I'm shooting right through her. The cards are not in the sun, they're in the shade. A white card in the shade is still a white card, folks. Just because you think you need to have the white card in the sun doesn't mean that's so. You don't. This was all done in the shade, and I wanted this very bright poppy face, and I used white cards in the shade. White cards in the shade are still white cards, and your subject reflects what's around it. Her eyes and her skin reflected white. My friend Thomas shot in the studio with a single light source. This is shot in the studio on a white background. So why is the background so gray? Well, simply Thomas is about maybe 15 feet in front of the background. We have an octabox on him, and the octabox is flagged off from hitting the background. So a white background that's not getting very much light goes very, very dark gray. It's in the shadow. And we light him up. This is a dramatic light, so we've got highlights through here. And in color, this shot it's all right in color, but in black and white, we pick up the dramatic face, the bright shirt, and the tattoo. In color, not so much of a big deal. It just doesn't have that edginess to it. And I think that edginess is one of the things I love about shooting black and white. This is Mr. Washington, and he is a friend of mine and a director, choral director, down in Phoenix at the Phoenix Children's Chorus. They asked me to shoot all their directors and accompanists, and they wanted a very clean background, so we went with the Cove 3 stops under. And this is a very large softbox to Mr. Washington's right, and a very large V card on his right, my left, and on his left, my right, is the very large octabox softbox. We marked everything off in the studio so that every director that came in, and they trickled in over about a week, every director that came in stood in the very same spot and got the shot. Now, I knew when I was shooting them that I wanted to do something else with the shots, make them black and white, monochrome, what have you. And that's okay because we've got this big light source over here. We've got a very soft light source over here. So I can make some choices in presentation of black and white, just like I did back in the day, which was I can choose my developer and I could choose my paper. So I could use a number 1 paper and get something very, very soft, or I could use a number 5 paper, which would be a very high contrast paper, and then the various regions within. A lot of photographers thought of a number 3 as the most neutral paper, 2 being softer than neutral, 1 being super soft and very much softer than neutral. And of course 4 being a little bit more contrasty than neutral, 5 being very contrasty. So we still had some options after we had the negative. We could develop the negative for more or less contrast. We could choose a paper for more or less contrast. And then we could choose our developer for more or less contrast and or grain. So there was so many things we could do back then that we still can do today. I knew I wanted options, and so I went for the options for my presentations of these pictures. And I'm going to show you Mr. Washington in 4 different black and white versions. A very high contrast version, very much like a number 4 paper would give us. In other words, you can see that the transition from highlight, specular highlight, to true value is pretty quick, and this the shadow side goes way dark. In this very soft, perhaps a number 1 paper, we get a much smoother fall off. The shadow area doesn't go as dark. We have much more texture in the jacket, and then we have texture in this jacket as well, but we have kind of a nice feel to this. This is very contrasty. So very soft contrast on the right, very hard contrast on the left. We can take that into the black and white realm instead of the sepia realm. And we've got a super contrast image on the left, but there's detail in the shadow area. That's great. So this looks like a number 3 paper. And over here we have a very bright, very light representation, almost like a faded image. Notice the difference in the hands, but very little difference in the shirts. Difference in the jackets, the blacks, but not that much difference in the skin tone and the highlights right here. This is all contrast and luminance. And these are the choices that we have when doing black and white. The nice thing about doing black and white with digital is that we can make these choices after we've made the photograph, where going into the processing stage of a roll of film, you're going to have to make decisions at that point that cannot be changed. Choosing this developer, this temperature for this type of negative, you're done. You can't go, well, let me reprocess this negative. You can't do it. In digital photography, that digital negative, we can process it forever, different ways. I think there's a lot of mystique about black and white, and I think that's cool. But one of the things that I think mostly about black and white is that it reveals more about the subject than color photography. Not all the time, but most of the time. Nothing's absolute in photography, so please, folks, understand that. There's no one answer, one way, one thing in photography. It just doesn't happen. But in black and white, we tend to see more of the subject's context. Color will add, I don't remember what Pat's wearing here color-wise. I don't know if this is, a feather of bright colors, and she's wearing dark, this was dark red, and that was bright orange back there, and got the sunlight coming through a window, and all that's going to be a different photograph. We eliminated all that information, what color her sweater is, and the feather and the background, and even her hair color, and we took it all down to one set of colors, and then we see the look in her eye and her expression, and the sort of melancholy feel to the entire photograph, looking through a window at a setting sun, or in this particular case, looking through a window frame in the studio with a bright 2K Fresnel lens on the other side, hot light. It's our choice when we're doing these things to make the shots that we want to make. Robert Frank was a wonderful, one of our great photographers, black and white photographer. I'm going to show you three shots real quick and discuss how we converted them. In this particular shot of Michelle, I got a very beautiful soft light feel in color, and I wanted the soft light feel in black and white. So that's how I processed it. Notice I kept everything very neutral in here. Yellow against the skin tone looks really great. White against a just slight skin tone still looks pretty good. I like it. I like the way her eyes pop in the black and white. I like the way her lips show. I had to burn the lips in a little bit. I had to burn in a little bit of the cheekbone here, just to give it that glamour look or that beauty look, but very much works for me. This is a shot that I wanted to be very high key. I wanted it to be high key in color, and so I achieved that. This is a natural light shot in Seattle, and she is standing right at the edge of the shadow line, looking out at the brightness of full sun. Not a cloudy day, but full sun out in front of her. But because she's right at the shadow line, we don't have hard shadows on her from the sun. And so it really opens it up. Now in black and white, I brought everything up. And then I boosted the blacks a little bit, just like using a number 5 paper. I could boost the contrast up here and let her skin go very pale. And this shot took a slightly desaturated image on the left side and applied an old sepia flavor to it on this side, which sort of begs or presents the context of the old camera and the brick wall, etc. So it just seemed right for me to bring this over. Notice how the black and white accentuates the contrast, accentuates the very slight vignette that we have over here, and pulls that contrast so we have a glow behind her that we don't really even see over here. We kind of feel it, but we're not really seeing it as nearly as dramatic as on that side. So there's so many things that you can do with black and white. It's a way of seeing. Black and white is a way of seeing. And so let's put our thinking caps on, let's put our brain caps on and remind ourselves that we are looking at the world as monochrome for the next 8 weeks, or at least the subjects that we're shooting for the class. So thanks for taking the black and white portrait class. I appreciate it, and I'll see you in the webinars.